regular City Council meeting for October 18th, 2022. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez is not present. Councilmember Friedman?
Here.
Councilmember Snedden? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Harmon is not yet present. Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez?
Present.
Councilmember Jordan? Here. And Mayor Rouse.
Here. All right, very good. Madam, do we have a ceremonial item? And should we read that, please, Madam Clerk?
We do, and that's item 1, National Arts and Humanities Month, October 2022. Yes, I know you too.
It's National Arts and Humanities Month. Whereas October has been recognized as National Arts and Humanities Month by the White House and Congress for more than 30 years, and whereas arts and cultural expression uniquely inspire local identity and belonging, acknowledge and celebrate and bridge differences, foster resilience, and reflect our shared humanity, and whereas Santa Barbara's diverse museums and cultural institutions serve as centers of lifelong learning, facilitating broad engagement and exploration of science, history, the arts, and the natural world. And whereas they provide repositories and resources for our community members' diverse histories, cultures, and achievements, inspiring the next generation of culture bearers, scientists, artists, educators, and leaders. And whereas local museums have performed extraordinary public services to support our community in times of need, operating as classrooms, meal distributors, shelters, employers, and PPE and vaccination centers, easy for me to say. Whereas Santa Barbara Museum and Cultural Spaces recently established one of the largest Museums for All networks in the nation, providing free and reduced admission to low-income individuals and families receiving food assistance. Now therefore I, Randy Rouse, by virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayor of the city of Santa Barbara, California, do hereby proclaim October 2022 as National Arts and Humanities Month in Santa Barbara, and encourage everyone to celebrate and visit our diverse museums and cultural institutions for the betterment of present and future generations. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Mayor Rouse, members of council. We are so fortunate that Santa Barbara is rich with these cultural resources. As Mayor Rouse said, museums are a reflection of a community's interests and values. And just taking a look around at all of the museums that we have in our area, you can see the diversity of interests that they represent, from local history, natural history, botany, marine life, science, fine art, contemporary art, all kinds of things. But being community resources, it's imperative that we ensure that our museums are available and accessible to all members of our community. And as the mayor said in the proclamation, just over a year ago, 18 museums in Santa Barbara County joined Museums for All, enabling families who receive food assistance or CalFresh cards to show that card and receive free or deeply discounted admission into any of the participating museums here, as well as over 900 participating museums across the nation. So we are so proud. We are the largest regional concentration of museums who have committed to this inclusiveness and accessibility program. We are grateful to the support of the city, the community, and everyone who supports museums and cultural institutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Administrator, are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Mayor Rouse.
Okay, very good. We'll move to public comment then. I have a couple of speaker slips here for folks that are in the room. This is public comment for items that are not on the agenda but are within the purview of this body. You have 3 minutes at the podium. Our first commenter will be Linda, I don't want to say Foster. Three minutes,
Good
please.
afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Linda Foster. I live in the Nolita zone of Santa Barbara, and we are right in the path of the airport, and I'm addressing the quantity of planes and the direction, the trajectory of them that fly over I live in a mobile home park, and an aerial view, our homes just look like little boxes on the ground, but there's a lot of families that live there. We have beautiful homes in there. And since the new terminal has been built, the increase and the size of the passenger planes that come in and out has gotten louder. And they are starting to fly, or have been for quite a while, directly over our park. And I've lived there for 16 years, and when I moved in, there were many years where, at that time, they were smaller aircraft, but they would come in over the industrial area, which is located just before you get to the end of Ward Drive to where our mobile home park is. And a lot of us don't understand why we have to. It's horrible. It's like a 101 rush hour overhead. And the altitude of them when they take off the noise is deafening. And it's a loud hiss and a roar. And they start at 5:15 in the morning typically, and there's 3 flights. And I get that they're making their connections for the East Coast flights and whatnot. My only priority at this point is to consider, I don't know if it's an ordinance that you guys would be implementing, I don't know, but to see if the airlines could redirect the flight path back towards that area of the industrial park and try to provide a quieter area for us. I know there's the exhaust issue with that, but primarily the noise is incredible. It's so low in altitude, and please see if maybe you guys can take some time to consider this. Maybe even drive out and drive through the park. You'll most likely see 1 or 2 planes taking off while you're going. If Fess Parker built the park, and it's beautiful. We've got a big lake in there, and it's unbelievable, and I'm concerned about the value of our homes when there's times when you want to sell out. And I don't know what else to say other than it's really, really a concern. And I wish there were 200 more people here that live in the park, but I'm here to represent them. So my time is
Your
up.
time is up, but thank you very much. We got your
Thank you.
comments.
For considering.
Next speaker is Michael Baker.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Michael Baker, CEO, United Boys and Girls Clubs. Wanted to first and foremost thank the mayor for making the time to come to our event Saturday night. Very successful event. It was nice to see you and your wife there, and appreciate your generous support. I wanted to give a shout out to many times we attend events and we take the time to acknowledge the people that support the events. I think it's important to do that in between events as well. And I just wanted to do a special shout out to 2 corporations that have been tremendous supporters of our organization. And I know the city makes determinations on a lot of business that needs to be done, but I would encourage folks that wonder if an organization like Cox Communications, huge supporter of the Boys and Girls Clubs, been a tremendous asset for us. We are the only Boys and Girls Club organization I know in the country that has 5 technology centers in the organization. So it's phenomenal, very generous support, and also one that everybody knows and loves dearly, Montecito Bank and Trust. Big supporters of not only Boys and Girls Club, but many charities. So just want to say a special shout out to both of those groups and appreciate their support and look forward to seeing you all at the clubs.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. It was a great event, and have fun on the 3 decades delayed honeymoon you're about to go on. So enjoy yourself. All right, very good. Are there any public commenters online?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. With that, we'll close public comment, general public comment. We'll go to the consent calendar. Do we have some items to read?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item 1, ordinance to assign additional civilian police oversight duties to the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners. Ordinance adoption. Recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the municipal code by adding chapter 2.09 to assign additional civilian police oversight duties to the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners. Item 3, proposal to amend various sections of Title 17 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code pertaining to definitions, vessels, slip assignments, and parking in the Santa Barbara Harbor, ordinance introduction. Recommendation that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the Santa Barbara Municipal Code, SBMC, by amending Section 17.04.010, 17.12.050, 17.20.005, and 17.36.040 pertaining to definitions, vessels, slip assignments, and parking in the Santa Barbara Harbor. Item 4, 2022 through 2026 Supervisors Association Bargaining Unit Memorandum of Understanding. An amendment of Resolution Number 22-064, the Position and Salary Control Resolution for fiscal year 2023. Ordinance Introduction Resolution. Recommendation the Council, A, ratify the Memorandum of Understanding with the Santa Barbara City Supervisory Units Bargaining Unit through introduction and subsequent adoption of by reading of title only. An ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara adopting the 2022 through 2026 Supervisors Memorandum of Understanding and providing for compensation changes for confidential supervisor employees. And B, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Resolution Number 22064, the Position and Salary Control Resolution for fiscal year 2023, affecting the salaries of certain classifications in the Supervisors Association, effective October 22nd, 2022. Item 5, 2022 through 2024 Hourly Employees Bargaining Unit Memorandum of Understanding and Amendment of Resolution Number 22064, the Position and Salary Control Resolution for fiscal year 2023, Ordinance Introduction Resolution. Recommendation that Council, A, ratify the Memorandum of Understanding between the City and Service Employees International Union Local 620 Hourly Employees Bargaining Unit for the period of July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2024, by introduction and subsequent adoption of, by reading of title only, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara adopting the 2022 through 2024 Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Santa Barbara and the Service Employees International Union Local 620 Hourly Employees Bargaining Unit. And B, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Resolution Number 22064, Position and Salary Control Resolution for fiscal year 2023, affecting the salaries of certain classifications in the SEIU Hourly Bargaining Unit effective October 22nd, 2022. Item 6, authorize execution of a quitclaim deed on property known as 219 East Haley Street. Resolution. Recommendation the council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara authorizing the Public Works Director to execute a quitclaim deed conveying a vacant remnant parcel adjacent to assessor parcel number 031202014. Item 7, authorize execution of underground utility easement to Southern California Edison on City Park property adjacent to 900 Calle de los Amigos. Resolution. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara authorizing the Public Works Director to execute an underground utility easement to Southern California Edison on City Park property adjacent to 900 Calle de los Amigos. And finally, item 8, acceptance of State of California Office of Traffic Safety Selected Traffic Enforcement Grant Resolution Agreement. Recommendation that council, A, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Resolution Number 22059, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2023 to approve an increase of revenue and expenditure appropriations in fiscal year 2023 in the Police Department Miscellaneous Grant Fund budget in the amount of $200,000, and B, accept the State of California Office of Traffic Safety Grant in the amount of $200,000 and authorize the Chief of Police to execute the grant agreement.
Thank you. Does anyone from council need to pull any items off of consent? Is there any public comment for consent calendar, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for consent.
So move.
Moved by Friedman.
Second.
Second by Gutierrez. May we have a roll call vote, please?
This is a motion for the entirety of consent, a motion by Councilmember Friedman, seconded by Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez. Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez not present. Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon.
Yes.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan.
Yes.
And Mayor Rouse.
Aye. All right, that concludes the consent calendar. Can I get a report from the Finance Committee, please, Mr. Friedman?
Thank you. Today, as part of the Fiscal Sustainability Initiative, we heard a report from the Housing Authority just on their operations, their funding, challenges they have, and just the partnership we had. So it was informational only, but it did get in depth about the Housing Authority and the partnership that we have with them in terms of our budget and projects that they do. And we will be considering that as part of the ongoing effort that we're looking at.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll move on to the administrative attorney reports. We have an item to read, Madam Clerk.
Yes, one moment. There it is. This is item number 11, Access Advisory Committee Annual Report.
Very good. And may we have that staff report, please?
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse and members of the City Council, as well as members of the public who are in the audience today. My name's Ashley Shu. I'm the city's interim city engineer, and today I'll be providing an annual report on the Access Advisory Committee. I wanted to note that I've been serving as the interim city engineer for the past 10 months, and as part of that role, I've also been the ADA coordinator and the staff lead for the Access Advisory Committee. And part of the ADA coordinator's responsibility is providing an annual report to the council each year. So I'm wrapping up my interim roles, so this report is coming to you as I'm wrapping up my temporary assignment, and will be handing the reins back over to our permanent city engineer, Brian Demore, at the end of the month. My presentation today will provide a brief synopsis of the ADA coordinator's role, as well as the role of the Access Advisory Committee, or the AAC. We'll also highlight some recent achievements and activities by the AAC, and then discuss some future goals, objectives, and priorities, and touch on a couple of the challenges that we face. Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act applies to state and local government entities and protects qualified individuals with disabilities from discrimination on the basis of disability in services, programs, and activities that are provided by state and local governments. Any government agency with over 50 employees is required to designate an ADA coordinator to coordinate ADA compliance for their own staff as well as members of the community. So at the City of Santa Barbara, in recent years, the city engineer position has also been serving as the ADA coordinator. So as I mentioned, I've been filling that role for the last 10 months in my interim position. The ADA coordinator is responsible for coordinating efforts to comply with Title II and is responsible for investigating any complaints that come to the ADA coordinator, either complaints that come through members of the public or city employees. The ADA coordinator is also the primary point of contact for compliance, as I mentioned, for both the city organization and members of the community. They also ensure that all members of the workforce have an opportunity to participate in all programs, activities, and services, and ensure that ADA violations don't occur, and if they do, that they are remedied. The Access Advisory Committee originally began in 1988 as an ad hoc advisory committee to assist the ABR and the HLC in reviewing public projects. And their role has evolved over time, and later became known as the Staff Advisory Access Committee. And in 2008, the committee was formally renamed as the Access Advisory Committee. Most recently, in 2021, the AAC's resolution was revised to update their purpose and function, and to clarify a few administrative items. The adopted AAC resolution defines the purpose of the Access Advisory Committee, and generally they are charged with assisting and advising staff in a number of different items, but I'll highlight promoting the integration and participation of persons with disabilities. They serve as the body for receiving input from the community on the needs and concerns of the disabled community, and then communicating those to city staff. They serve as a stakeholder in the design, planning, and implementation of city projects and programs, and provide advice in setting priorities for city staff in prioritizing projects that will improve access in the city's public right-of-way. And they also educate the public about disability and disability access issues. Next, I'm going to move on to highlighting some of the recent achievements and activities over the past year. It's been a very busy year, and the AAC has been very engaged in a variety of areas related to accessibility. And I would like to pause and note that the majority of the AAC members currently have physical disabilities, so they are personally navigating accessibility challenges throughout the city on a daily basis. One key area of ongoing interest and concern has been the ADA compliance of the temporary outdoor dining facilities throughout the city, in the city's right-of-way. And the city continues to inspect and enforce ADA requirements for outdoor dining facilities. And I did have an update for the State Street Promenade. We've been working hard on ADA compliance there, and of the 44 businesses operating outdoor dining facilities, we have 6 that remain non-compliant. That was the number I received as of yesterday. And so over the past year, the Access Advisory Committee has continued to provide guidance to city staff on accessibility for the city's outdoor dining program. They also participated in a walkthrough of the State Street Promenade and have continued to provide feedback to city staff on how improvements could be made and implemented. The next 2 slides just show a couple examples of successful compliance by businesses. This was when the city ordered the clearing of the sidewalk areas of tables and chairs. And this slide has a before and after photo of a section of State Street. The before photo illustrates tables and chairs and heaters within the public sidewalk and obstructing the path of travel, with the after photo showing the clearing of those sidewalks and reestablishing that path of travel, which is so important for pedestrians to navigate, particularly those with disabilities. Similarly, this slide shows a before and after photo of Coast Village Road, and the before photo showing tables and heaters blocking the pretty narrow sidewalk on Coast Village Road, even further narrowing that sidewalk, and the after photo showing the sidewalks available for pedestrians. This is an example of an ADA violation that was brought to my attention as the ADA coordinator recently, and it involved a private restaurant that had been blocking ADA parking with their parklet setup. And this was on private property, and so part of my duty as the ADA coordinator is to get the right people involved to respond to these types of violations, even if it's outside of Public Works purview. And in this case, because it was on private property, it was outside of Public Works. So I engaged the community development's code enforcement team, and they took quick action to do an inspection. They made contact with the business owner and educated and directed them to clear the obstruction, which was cleared within just a couple of days of the complaint coming in. So this is a great example of successful cross-departmental coordination that often takes place when responding to a variety of ADA violations that are reported. The Access Advisory Committee is a key stakeholder in providing advice to city staff on the best locations for ADA and accessible parking throughout the city. They've continued to advance aspects of the Blue Curb Parking Initiative, and in the past year, they advocated for the addition of 6 new blue parking zones within the downtown plaza area, which city staff then installed. And our observation so far is that those blue zones have been really well utilized. Those are specifically on the 0-100 blocks off of State Street. And it reinforces the need to consider additional blue curb zones throughout the downtown core. The AAC is also a key stakeholder in helping city staff identify and prioritize sidewalk barrier removals. And by sidewalk barriers, it means anything that obstructs the path of travel for pedestrians. So that could be missing sidewalks, missing access ramps, sidewalks that are uplifted due to tree roots, various street furniture or utilities that can be in the path of travel and creating a meandering path of travel for pedestrians. City staff takes these priorities that are set by the AAC's ad hoc committee and then works to incorporate projects into larger capital projects where that makes sense as the most effective and efficient way to complete improvements. Or in some cases, in-house city crews can perform some of the more minor adjustments that are needed or respond to immediate needs that may come to our attention through the AAC. AAC members also advise staff on recommended locations for accessible pedestrian signals. And an accessible pedestrian signal is a pedestrian push button that communicates when to cross the street in a non-visual manner. So that can be a combination of audible tones, speech messages, and vibrating surfaces. And with input from AAC members, the city has recently installed 6 new APS systems. And we plan to install another 10 additional this fiscal year. And the AAC members help prioritize and select key locations on an annual basis. Members of the AAC also participated as key stakeholders in the development of the city's new accessible website. And this was a great success with the collaboration between AAC members and city staff in developing our new website. And several of the AAC members took time to advise staff on features that would make the new website more accessible for those with vision impairments, and assisted with testing out different features and providing that feedback to staff. And that really resulted in a very smooth rollout of our new website in providing these enhanced accessibility features for our community. The city has also completed a number of capital projects over the past year that have improved accessibility throughout the community. And that includes 89 new and retrofitted access ramps, the installation of 140,000 square feet of new sidewalk, completion of the Cabrillo Pavilion renovation. That was a complete renovation of that facility to bring it up to current standards and codes. Completion of the Las Positas and Modoc Roads multi-use path, which is a fully accessible 2.6 mile long pathway along the Las Positas and Modoc Roads corridors. We also completed intersection improvements at the West Carrillo and San Andreas intersection to realign the crosswalks, shorten crosswalks, and make that intersection more accessible for pedestrians. And as part of that project, also installed a new pedestrian crossing with flashing beacons at the intersection of Carrillo and San Pascual. Currently in construction, we have the Central Library Plaza project and the ADA elevator. And that project, as I mentioned, is in construction now and is slated for completion in 2023. And then currently in design, we have 2 projects here in the City Hall building to complete a restroom remodel and install a new ADA elevator, which will bring both of those facilities up to current code. Now that we've taken a quick look back on the past year, now taking a look forward and looking at future goals, objectives, and priorities for the AAC and city staff. I recently met with several members of the AAC, and together we developed these goals and objectives for the year moving forward. So this slide summarizes the goals, some of the more programmatic, overarching goals in the year moving forward. And that generally includes improving accessibility throughout the city, continuing to raise awareness for ADA deficiencies, especially on private property, encouraging community collaboration and input, full citywide compliance for outdoor dining facilities, including parklets through outreach, enforcement, education, and enforcement, and developing and providing professional in-service training for city ADA liaison staff as well as AAC members, and continuing to provide input on design, development, and execution of key capital projects, and trying to get that input as early in the design process as possible to be able to incorporate that feedback. Taking a look at objectives, so some of the more tangible tasks that we're hoping to accomplish over the next year. Looking at the city's capacity and resources to establish a full-time ADA enforcement officer. This would provide a staff person to complete the ongoing ADA inspections of the outdoor dining facilities within the public right-of-way. We're currently relying on consultant help to fill that need. The AAC would also like to form an ad hoc committee to start reviewing and developing a scope of work for working on an ADA transition plan update. And that is a large document that is ready for an update, and so the AAC would like to start helping city staff with scoping what that update would look like. And then city staff would like to budget for the preparation of a draft ADA transition plan for the public right-of-way, which would be a new document in addition to the transition plan that focuses on city facilities. And also a goal to draft a new AAC member orientation manual by the end of the fiscal year. And again, most of these items have been covered in the presentation so far, but the priorities for the AAC moving forward into the next year, looking at the ADA transition plan update, accessibility of outdoor dining facilities and parklets, continuing to explore opportunities for additional blue curbs throughout the city, ADA and parking enforcement, and seeing additional response for that. In-service training for city staff as well as AAC members, developing outreach and education tools for local businesses and the public, and sidewalk barrier removal, which continues as part of, largely as part of our capital projects. And then noting that ADA, AAC members and city staff acknowledge that there are challenges that that present themselves in our attempts to achieve our goals and objectives, and wanted to highlight a couple that are timely at this point, especially given staff resource concerns and limited staff resources, especially with so many vacancies across departments right now, and competing high priority requirements and commitments. So that is an acknowledged challenge that we have in being responsive and available to the community for complaints. And then identifying funding sources for activities, programs, and services. The city is really successful at leveraging grant and city funds to complete capital projects, but we acknowledge that at times it can be challenging to find programmatic funding, especially when needs present themselves between budget cycles. And as I close my presentation, I wanted to note that in these last 10 months, filling this role of the ADA coordinator, it's been very clear to me how significant the position is to the community and what a large responsibility it is. And it's also given me optimism, despite all the challenges we face, that working with a group of dedicated community members and staff collaboratively, we really can implement important changes that help our entire community and those with disabilities. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I also wanted to mention for members of the public that if a member of the public has any ADA concerns or would like to report a violation, they can always be sent to the email address that's on the screen, which is ada@santabarbaraca.gov. That's a shared inbox that's monitored by several staff on a daily basis. And so that is a great way to communicate with staff, and the ADA coordinator is responsible for following up on those requests and getting them to the appropriate person to respond to. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Questions from council? Mr. Jordan, your light is on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I forget, Ms. Shu, so one of the benchmarks of when people move around to graciously give of their time is what we hear. So absolutely nothing, which is good. So I'd just like to congratulate you. Brian also did a great job out at the airport, and I don't know what your feelings are about both of you shuffling back, but I just know you've by lack of hearing anything bad, I know you've done a really good job in this interim period, and I just want to say thanks and appreciate that. So I'll just go kind of backwards to forward. I was confused when you were talking about transition plans. The one we have right now is for private property?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan, the transition plan that we have is focused on city-owned facilities.
And then,
So buildings.
which one were you going to do that's new?
The new one would be for the public right-of-way.
Okay. What's the difference between those two?
The public right-of-way would include our sidewalks, access ramps, anything that's not on private property.
Okay. And how long has it been a transition plan?
The most recent transition plan update for our city buildings and facilities, I believe, was done in 2008.
Okay.
And that was an update from what was originally created after the Americans with
So we're
Disabilities
just
Act
kind
was
of always
passed in the 90s.
transitioning, right? Yeah. And then, just have a clue. I know we do a ton of work out there, but we do the work that we have the resources for. So I'll just call them, I'm sure there's a better name for them, but they're the obvious corners that we're always doing. Anytime we're playing with the road, we do the corners. Anytime we're not playing with the road, they're just working through neighborhoods. Any idea on just kind of the scope over the last 5 or 10 years? It just seems like we've done a ton of those. Those should be like a wave the flag moment if there is one, right?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan, I don't have the number in front of me, but you're right. We have installed a very large number of corner access ramps in the public right-of-way over the last several years, really since Measure C passed. And when we grind and overlay a street, do pavement rehabilitation, we're required to upgrade the corner ramps. And with the significant increase in the amount of paving work that we're doing, that has resulted in a significant number of additional ramps.
And you mentioned the difficulty in getting resources, particularly for staffing. Are there not, I mean, are there just not grant funds to chase for ongoing costs related to staffing in this area? For ADA compliance, or you have special terms for that person back in there, the type of role they would be. It just seems kind of a little conflicting, like we get all this great construction money to do stuff, but then we don't have the ability to pick the other stuff, to work on the other stuff because we don't have the resources that affects people day to day too. So just, there are no grants like that?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan, none that I'm aware of specifically for that need, but we're always on the lookout for any available grant funding, and always interested in leveraging that to the extent possible.
Then, just kind of have a crazy question. Somebody told me about an ability in other states when you're talking about blue spaces on private property, which I'm sure everybody witnesses all the time. Just somebody pulling up and parking for 10 minutes on it. And of course, that has the potential of being the 10 minutes that somebody comes along that actually needs that spot and now has nowhere to park. But there's programs in other states that allow citizens to be, for lack of a better word, deputized, to go through a certification process. And so if that's my blue space there and somebody's parked in my blue space, a person would take a picture of the vehicle that shows the license plate, take a picture of the vehicle that shows the blue marker, take a picture of the windshield that doesn't show a placard, and submits that to the city with an affidavit, and then the city actually issues a citation. Have we ever talked about that here, or is that is that an anecdotal thing, or does that exist, and what would it take to pursue that?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan, that is something that we have talked about with the AAC and with the police department. There's actually an app on your phone that can do something very similar, and it's available to any community member. And so I have been communicating with the police department about the possibility of that being implemented in the city of Santa Barbara, but we haven't made any progress quite yet, but there are a number of liability concerns about that in having non-sworn officers performing enforcement. But that is something that we've been actively pursuing.
It's usually when there's a non-sworn officer there, that's when the abuses happen, huh? So, yeah, I get that. Thank you so much, and thank you again for the 11 months of great work.
Thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you. Thanks again for the report and all the hard work. I've been attending and meeting with some of the Access Advisory Committee members, and they brought up some points that I kind of want to run past you. So when it comes to, you mentioned the remodel for the Cabrillo Pavilion. So they brought to my attention that if a person in a wheelchair or somebody who had problems moving were to park on the east side, the most east side parking lot, they would have to go completely around and then up in order to get into the building. Is there any way that is there an elevator that they could take from the entrance, the bottom entrance of that building to get up to that main area?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, I would need to follow up with our facilities staff on the exact configuration. But my understanding is that an ADA elevator was installed as part of that project, and I would,
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, there is an ADA accessible elevator that goes all the way to the ground floor, and that was one of the major additions of that project. It is in the portion of the building that is operated by the Parks and Recreation Department for community use and for recreation. So it may not be open during times when there are public events in the top floor, but certainly it is a potential path of travel when the bottom floor is available.
Okay, with that being said, the other issue they brought to my attention is that at no point has the police come to them, or the architects in charge of the new police station come to them to meet them about their needs regarding the new police station. Is that something that could be scheduled?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, I was just having a conversation with the AAC Chair and Vice Chair last week about the agenda for the next meeting on November 18th, and that's one of the items that we're planning on having on an update from the project manager on the police station building.
That's great. So something else that they discussed was that at one point in time, I think maybe Mike Jordan just asked that, but at one point in time, you were able to apply to have a blue curb painted in front of your home, but they told me that that's no longer possible. Is that still accurate?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Gutierrez, that is still possible. We do receive those requests, and they go through our downtown team, and they evaluate the request, and if they verify that it's a valid request and then there's a need, then city staff can install a blue curb.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good to hear. The other request that they had was to have audio descriptions of presentations during meetings, city-related meetings. Is that something that you think we could address immediately, or do you think that would require further planning?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Gutierrez, I would need to look further into that as an option for our council meetings.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Gutierrez, it is something we've been talking about with our public information manager and looking at what that looks like and what we can do to make our meetings accessible in that manner. But I'm not sure that we've come up with a path yet, but we are talking about it.
Okay. The other point that they brought up to me was whether they could meet more frequently. So instead of it being quarterly, maybe increasing it to 5 meetings a year. Is that possible?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Gutierrez, the resolution for the AAC requires 4 meetings per year, so generally they're held quarterly. There's always an opportunity to add a special meeting if there is a need for additional discussion. I would note that it is a staffing resource concern, especially right now with a lot of staff vacancies. But we can certainly work with the committee to schedule a special meeting if something arises in between the normally scheduled quarterly meetings.
So that's a good segue since you brought up staffing. Another request they had was to hire a full-time ADA city staffer. right now you're just kind of temporary, is that right?
Councilmember Gutierrez, that's correct. So the city engineer position also serves as the ADA coordinator for the city. And since I'm filling in as city engineer, I'm also have been filling in as the ADA coordinator.
And Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Gutierrez, I just want to give a little history there because it's instructive as to why it is where it is. There is not one department that is isolated to be dealing with ADA issues. It's absolutely a cross-departmental, organization-wide issue. The person who acts as our Access Advisory staff person, our ADA coordinator, is responsible for being sort of the liaison and establishing and routing issues to the appropriate departments, and certainly and bringing them to the table as necessary to be addressing issues. We put it in our engineering division because that is a division that does construction, and a lot of these accommodations, although not all of them, require construction.
Okay. Another point that they brought up was that in about around the year 2008, there was a transition plan developed by the ADA Access Advisory Committee, and they brought to my attention that the majority of the things that they came up with back then haven't been addressed. So is that something that you refer to or can refer to see if those needs have been addressed or being discussed?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Gutierrez, yes, and that was the ADA transition plan that I mentioned during the presentation that is in need of an update. And I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but the city has made good progress in upgrading its facilities. But it is time for that document to be looked at again in terms of going through and doing inspections to identify the improvements that have been made and those that are still outstanding, and putting together, kind of looking at forecasting a schedule for when the remaining items would be completed. But the city has made significant efforts. The Cabrillo Pavilion project is one example of one of the facilities that was evaluated in detail in the ADA transition plan, and that has now been completed. But it often takes planning and budgeting for these large capital projects, including the City Hall restroom and ADA elevator, and the ADA elevator at the library, which is now under construction.
Okay, so there hasn't been an updated transition plan since 2008?
Correct. Not a formal update to that document.
So I think, did you just say that you're gonna update that soon?
We're starting the process.
Okay.
And that will involve budgeting some funding for that. Back in 2008, it was about a $500,000 consultant effort to put together that comprehensive transition plan and evaluating all the city facilities. I would expect, well, with cost inflation, I would expect that it would be less than that, since it would be an update, but we haven't yet scoped out what that exact scope of work would look like. But it is in the plan for starting to make progress on that in the next year.
Next year, as in 2023?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Budgeting in FY '24.
All right, thanks.
Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. I would like to take this opportunity to express appreciation for your work, and as I wouldn't have mentioned it here, but I shared with you before the meeting that maybe it's the circles that I talk engineering with, but you have an incredibly high reputation, and I've actually heard a lot of good, so not just the absence of anything bad, but actually a lot of appreciation for your work, so thank you for that. So then I have some questions. So would there be enough work for a full-time ADA coordinator assigned to that role, in your opinion? Or that might be a city administrator question, I'm not sure, yeah.
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Sneddon, in my experience over the last 10 months, I would say that it is a lot to handle with the city engineer responsibilities. I think we would need to look more closely at it to see what if a higher level of need is there. But it's definitely has been a challenge to balance the workload and ensuring being responsive to the needs of the community when these complaints do arise, and being available to the Access Advisory Committee.
And I'll just add on, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sutton, that there are so many areas, as you're well aware, that we are struggling. Even if we have the resources, we don't have the people to fill those resources to meet community needs. We continue to prioritize, as you saw with anyone who's made zoning or building violation complaints knows that we have a long, long waiting list there. And the prompt response of that department shows you, for the private sector violation, shows you the priority that we place on responding to these types of issues. And certainly, as council considers its various priorities, and I know you have a lot, and we are also looking forward as how we continue to operate this organization, it's one of the conversations that we expect to continue to be having, because this is an important area of developing policy, and unfortunately one where most of our built environment was built prior to having the standards that we're working hard to implement.
Thank you for that. And maybe a follow-up to that, that it seems to me, and I'm just looking for feedback on that, freeing high-level department staff from addressing the ADA issues across the whole organization may actually lead to efficiencies. If there was someone dedicated to that across the whole organization, if you could speak to that.
So, yes, I can. It might lead to efficiencies. However, I think the fact that we've put a high-level department staff in this role speaks to the importance of it and the sort of the authority that that person has in executing and getting the attention of staff as to the importance of this. So if we did do something different, I would want it to be somebody who had a good level of authority.
Understood. Thank you for explaining that. And then what is the current process for an Access Advisory Committee member to request items to be put on the agenda?
On the Access Advisory Committee agenda, I'd have to defer. That's, yeah.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, we solicit input during meetings for future agenda items. We recently did a call for future agenda items at the meeting not the past meeting, but the meeting before, and we have a compiled list, and then I meet with the chair and the vice chair monthly to discuss the future agenda items. And so we're always talking about the upcoming agenda, and if a committee member didn't have a chance to provide their input, they could always contact me or contact the chair with suggestions for future agenda items.
Perfect, thank you. So it's a two-way communication, so that if there are members of the committee who see something in the community that they want to bring forward, that they can bring that up in open session and have a discussion about whether to place that on the agenda.
Yes, certainly.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Sneddon, if I could just interrupt there for a minute, and just, according to the resolution that was adopted for the committee rules, to get matters on the agenda for the committee, the coordinator prepares the agenda, and the coordinator can place things on the agenda, or by written request of 2 members of the committee.
Thank you. So the equivalent of a two-person memo could be
Right,
put.
right.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think there might be some confusion about that in the process, so I think that's great to have that cleared up. And then the AAC purview is only city projects right now. It's not city-wide. If it's private, then that goes to code enforcement. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the process.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, I think I'm understanding your question to mean
What is the purview? I'll ask it
the
as an
purview of
open-ended
the Access
question.
Advisory
Yes.
Committee. Looking back at the resolution, it's to advise staff on any issue related to accessibility within the city, whether it's on city property or not.
Okay, Thank you.
And I'll just follow up if I may, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sutton. So the city is responsible for compliance with ADA on city facilities and for city programs. So, for example, if we have a concert in the park type thing, we need to make sure that's accessible. So the private business owners are responsible for complying with ADA on private property. So if there are concerns about that, that is a private issue that we will investigate through our community development staff if it's brought to our attention. But there are also avenues in the ADA that allow direct resolution between the parties.
Thank you. And then please tell me if I should not be asking this right now, but for parklets for structures in the public right-of-way, it's a gray area. Who is responsible for that?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sutton, because the parklets in the public right-of-way are a program of the city, we have responsibility to ensure that the people who are operating those parklets are operating in compliance with accessibility standards. They also have an obligation as the operator to be, so it is somewhat of a shared, but it's unlike private property where it is not our obligation, it is their obligation. We obviously want to assist in that, in getting it resolved, but the responsibility lies with the private party. In this situation, we share that.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess a follow-up question, last one. I'm shocked that there are still 6 that remain non-compliant on State Street, like stunned, to be honest. And what is I see Ms. Clark there also, what is the status of that? I think our last direction from council was, warning, another warning, and out. So where are we with that, with those 6 non-compliant?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, I know that inspections are happening right now as we speak on the promenade, but I will ask Ms. Clark, our downtown parking plaza and parking manager, to provide more detail.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon. So as Ms. Shu mentioned, our certified accessibility specialists who we've contracted with are out with staff right now as we speak, doing another round of inspections on those ones that remain non-compliant. So I believe of those 6, I believe 4 of them have already received 2 administrative citations, which means if they don't pass this inspection, they will be required to remove the parklet from State Street. So that will be, they will have their right-of-way operation privileges suspended. The other 2, I believe one of them we've actually not been able to inspect the full facility because they don't open until later, and so every time we've gone by, they haven't had their tables set up. So we're coordinating with them so that we can get there when they have the setup so that we can actually inspect the dining area itself. They are compliant as to ramps and actual access, but it's just the table element that we're looking for. And then there's one other one who I believe is a newer business, so they kind of missed the first round of inspections, so they're just, they've had 1 citation, so this would then go to the 2nd citation, after which we would have that, again, that facility would be removed if they didn't comply.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. Appreciate all the work you've done, Ms. Shu, over the last almost year now. Can't believe it's been that long, but and so the question on the parklets, I think you answered them. So the next question I would have, and I don't know if it was specifically stated, but I just want to ask it just to clarify. So in addition to the city engineer, how many staff do we have that investigate and enforce complaints? Is it just the city engineer?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, I'm pausing for a moment to think about others that respond. Because it is a cross-departmental response, it would be difficult for me to provide, a number of full-time employees that respond. The code enforcement team over in community development certainly has staff that respond to these types of complaints on private property. And if a complaint comes in regarding a Parks and Recreation facility, then their staff would respond. So it largely is on the ADA coordinator to facilitate and determine the right people to get involved in a response, but there are other employees from other departments that are responding to that request.
Thanks. I just wanted to appreciate clarifying that even though we are short-staffed, we are able to respond. It's just we don't have the level of staffing that we need when it comes in all the departments, because all the departments have staffing shortages based on where the complaint would go to, if I understand correctly.
Councilmember Friedman, that's correct.
And then in terms of, since it was brought up, the parklets, how are parklets that are outside of the promenade addressed? Say from Coast Village Road, to ensure that everybody on Coast Village Road is ADA compliant all the way to, say, Uptown.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, I will let Ms. Clark speak to that again, but I know that they do have ADA inspections that are planned for the parklets outside of the State Street Promenade.
Yes, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, so that's going to be our next big effort. We're going to start later this week with doing an outreach effort to all of those businesses, just to make them aware, if they aren't already, that those inspections are going to be coming within the next few weeks. Working on finalizing the date with our cast when they're going to be out there, but again, I would anticipate that within the next 2 weeks. We've also worked closely with our city attorney to develop a more expedited process for achieving compliance. The process that we used on State Street was the process that's outlined in the municipal code, which involves issuing multiple administrative citations before, finally we have the ability to suspend privileges to operate. We worked with the city attorney under the Economic Recovery Transition and Extension Ordinance to develop a process that will, number one, actually speed the process of doing those inspections in the right-of-way by creating some kind of streamlined paperwork to hand out rather than having to handwrite out a big correction notice in the field. And number two, to be able to move more quickly to that final suspension phase, so where we can just issue 2 of those correction notices rather than having to do the full administrative citation, which takes considerable staff time and effort. Realistically, with the administrative citation process, about the quickest that we can get to a resolution would be 8 weeks. Just because of the time that it takes to prepare those, and also the time that we have to give the different businesses to correct and then re-inspect. And whereas the new process that we're looking at, we should be able to do it in probably half that time, depending on availability of our consultants.
So we're starting that process in a couple weeks, but we're giving notice to all the businesses outside of State Street. And then because we're moving to the administrative site, what'd you call it, administrative citation?
Yeah, so right now on State Street, we've been using an administrative citation process, whereas we're going to move to just using correction notices.
Correction notices.
Yes.
Okay. And that will speed up the time. It still provides the opportunity for them to gain compliance, but it speeds up the time that the compliance is achieved.
Yeah, Mayor Rounds, Councilmember Friedman, that's correct, because we won't have the lag of having to come back, record all that information, produce the administrative citation, mail it, give them another 3 weeks to comply, and then come back. We can just issue it in the field and then, give them the deadline and then come back on the deadline. So it kind of cuts out that middle section.
And this will be for all the parklets that are outside of the promenade, again, from, I guess, to the southern part of Coastal Village Road all the way up through Uptown and Mesa and everywhere else.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
So very quickly, I share my colleagues' dismay that there still are 6 that are not compliant, since that seems like a common theme we've been talking about every time up here. I'm a little confused. I ran 3 different operations that were public serving back in the day. I don't remember getting that many bites at the apple, that kind of time lag. Is that something relatively new, or is that just a workload thing? I realize that the parklet thing wasn't something that was designed, inspected, and permitted. It's just, there's there, and now you got to go out and retroactively do this. But did anything change, or just because we've got this tidal wave of issues to deal with at the same time?
Sure, Mayor Rouse, I can't speak to how the enforcement process would work for businesses on private property. This is something that's new for us in terms of going through this process in the public right-of-way.
So that you brought up my next question was a public-private thing, because I'm a little confused by that, because the law applies in either case. Normally, the private sector thing either comes by a complaint or during some kind of remodel permitting process. But there's no distinction in the application of the law between public and private, as far as I know, or is there?
Mayor Rouse, the law applies on both public and private property. It comes down to who is responsible for enforcing. And the Parklet program has essentially constructed facilities within the public right-of-way, which are not our standard practice to have those types of facilities within the right-of-way.
Okay, I don't want to beat this to death, but if somebody came with a complaint on a private property, a private business, and registered a complaint, an ADA non-compliance complaint, would we not be the enforcement mechanism? Would it be somebody else?
Mayor Rouse, the city would be. It would go to the community development code enforcement team.
All right, well,
But for the public right-of-way complaints, that is the purview of Public Works.
but still the city nonetheless.
Still the city, correct.
Okay, well, all right. I'll leave it at that. With that, we will go to public comment on this item. Our first up is Bob Burnham. Mr. Burnham, if you...
Mayor Rouse, members of the City Council, my name is Bob Burnham. I'm a member of the City Access Advisory Committee. First of all, thank you, Mayor Rouse, and all of you on City Council for being so willing to listen, to engage with me and other members in conversation about several accessibility issues. Thank you for willing to become more aware of our issues. And secondly, very high commendation to Ms. Hsu. Ashley has been with us for years, coming to our meetings, giving us updates on all the progress made through the block grant, community block grant development funding. That's a mouthful. Curb ramps, sidewalk infill, sidewalk repair. Thank you, Ms. Hsu, for years of supporting us and giving us those updates, and also just for juggling all your duties as interim city engineer and also being our interim ADA coordinator. It's not easy to take on all that and do such a yeoman job of being positive. Your tableside manner is 5-star. So thank you, thank you. Just two quick items. I urge you, Mayor Rouse and City Council, to please consider a full-time ADA coordinator position, number one, and number two, place that position in the city administrator's office with the resulting job description and job responsibilities in that position to give that person more power to work with multiple departments and really promote some of the issues and get things done that haven't been able to get done so far because the coordinator is sort of in a powerless position that can advise and can suggest, but I think being in the administrator's office would serve that a lot better. And my last request, real quickly, is that this committee be more engaged in a really transparent conversation with the city attorney's office, with city parking, with the city administrator herself, in having a civil, dynamic, but ongoing conversation regarding who's making the decisions and how we can engage with them directly in ongoing conversation to try to resolve some of the issues that are still pending. But thank you again, members of the city council for asking such great questions. A lot of them I was going to ask anyway, but I didn't have to because you were so thorough. Really appreciate all of your time and effort into this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Burnham. Perfectly on time. Madam Clerk, do we have some speakers that are waiting online with their hands raised and all that kind of fun stuff?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We have Nick Kuntz and then James Marston. Nick Kuntz. Kuntz, please go ahead. I'll give you a sec to get, oh, you are unmuted. Go ahead.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, I want to thank you for hearing this today. And I want to, I know you all know me, but for those who don't, I currently serve the city on both the Access Advisory Committee and the Building and Fire Safety Code Board of Appeals, as I have done for many years. I'm a member of the Board of Directors for the Tri-Counties Independent Living Resource Center and a vocal critic of our municipality's accessibility. But today I'll refrain from any criticism and share only praise, appreciation, and encouragement. There are many things to celebrate among the recent activities and achievements outlined in this staff report. It is a testament to the hard work and determination of my fellow AAC members. I would especially like to acknowledge and commend Ms. Shu for all she has done advancing the state of accessibility in our municipality. It is remarkable what she has achieved in her brief tenure, particularly in light of her other responsibilities. The role of the ADA coordinator is an important one, and Ms. Shu has done it justice. She has been proactive, empathetic, and dependable. I am disappointed to learn that she will leave this role next month. In closing, Council would have my greatest appreciation if they were to encourage such devotion and progress from future ADA coordinators by seeking to increase the funding for accessibility and by making the ADA coordinator a primary or even secondary role rather than a tertiary one. Thank you.
Thank you. May we have the next speaker, please?
Yes, next speaker is James Marston. James Marston, please go ahead. James Marston, go ahead. If you can unmute yourself, there also is a unmute button.
Okay, there we are. Sorry.
No problem. Go right ahead.
Okay. I want to first say that the Cabrillo Arts Pavilion plans called for an accessible elevator, which is there, but the hallways to it are both blocked with a keypad or a key card, and the elevator itself needs a key card. So there's no way at any time of day for anyone to use that elevator. Okay. I want to acknowledge the work of the members of the AAC and the ad hoc committee for this great report. I want to thank Ashley for a great job she did with learning about ADA requirements and trying to address major issues, and hope she is acknowledged for all the time she has spent on this new responsibility. As the report well documents, with her help, the AAC was able to achieve many accomplishments. I'm going to quote from her report: the ADA coordinator's role ensures compliance with Title II and ensures that ADA violations do not occur or are remedied if they do. And according to Administrator Ms. Bjork, the parking outdoor dining is a Title II. So 2.5 years later, we still have most of the parklets in the city still haven't even been inspected. So they concentrate on State Street, but there's still 70 or so that hasn't even been looked at yet. So 2.5 years with no inspection. So we are well aware that the original outdoor dining plan did not consider access problems, even though the members wrote to Council Public Works and Administrator as early as May of 2020. The vast majority of outdoor dining facilities have yet to be inspected. The report talks about ADA transition plan. Please be aware that the ADA regulations state that a schedule of mitigation must be part of the plan, and the person or position that is to mitigate these various violations be listed. And this has not been done since 2008. I asked the city administrator to meet with Ashley and to hear her suggestions to address the problems. Also meet with Brian Demore to find out what kind of funding he needs and how he can get staff help for this job. The city should allocate part of his time to an FTE from their office, as this is not only a public works expense and responsibility. I hope council and city staff understand how this position comes with no ability to enforce their findings and concerns, and can put the ADA coordinator at odds with her own department, other departments, and the city administrator's office. I asked council to direct the administrator's office to immediately appoint someone in their office to be responsible for receiving input that needs the city's attention for enforcement, and is accountable for documenting progress on compliance in order for the AAC to effectively perform its oversight responsibilities as delegated by the city council. Thank you so much for all your attention to this. I enjoyed all the great comments about Ashley's great work. I could go on for hours about that, but I also appreciate the council's members' good questions.
All right,
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mr. Mayor, there are no further raised hands, and it does not appear that there are any further members of the Access Advisory Committee who have logged on.
All right, very good. With that, then we will close public comment and go to council comments, and that would be Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, and thank you for this report. It's great to see all the areas where there's so much progress, and I'm really happy to hear it was put together with the collaboration with the committee. I remembered that part of our motion for the fee structure for the State Street Promenade was to have it be at a high enough level that it could fund a full-time ADA coordinator citywide. That was my recollection, that was part of the motion. I made the motion, and I'll have to go back and look at it, but that was my understanding, and maybe I could do a check-in here to see if that was not the case, but it was my intention that through conversations that would be a funded position citywide, and that recommendation had come out of conversations with committee members and how many times it had come up. So I'm just having a question about that, or a comment, or a recommendation, that, because in the priority list it says to look at the feasibility. I feel confident the feasibility is going to say it's not feasible because we have so many vacancies and so many issues with funding right now. So I thought that was part of the fee structure for the promenade, that would be enough to not just break even, but to fund such a position.
Ms. Bjork.
Mayor Rouse, council members, and then I'm sorry to say I don't remember the details of the fee structure. I do know you referred it to Finance Committee to further discuss it and bring it back to council. Certainly, the city is absorbing all of the expenses of the outdoor dining programs across the organization at this point, across the community at this point, and downtown parking is paying those costs, and we have contracted with a specialist to assist. So we don't have a full-time person. I will say that if we were hiring a city employee, I would like further direction from council as to the long-term planning for the outdoor dining, because I would hate to hire somebody and then have the whole basis on which we were planning to pay them disappear if we don't continue with a outdoor dining program that generates those fees. I think there are other ways to look at it as well.
Okay, then I'll make it as a comment that and maybe other council members might comment on it as well, I'm not sure, but that was my understanding that that was part of the structure, and that as we look at assessing maybe fees for parklets, and that all of that be self-sustaining. But I'll make the comment that it does seem to me that a full-time, there would be enough work, and a full-time coordinator position. I apologize for not making the arguments right now because I thought it was a foregone recommendation. So I would like to keep making that recommendation, that I think it would be beneficial, but I didn't know it was still a question.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sutton, Mr. Maurer has a better recollection than me, and he can refresh the recommendation.
Mr. Maurer, please.
Yes, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sneddon, and it's actually Ms. Clark that has a better recollection than she told me. But I do remember. It was important distinction is within the fee structure, which was recommended to go to Finance Committee, was a half a FTE for enforcement of ADA, as opposed to an ADA coordinator, which is policy and program. So just to be clear, and we are trying, and to that point, we do have informal enforcement that are advising our staff. So we hear you loud and clear. We are working very hard on that.
Thank you. So that was half of an FTE for enforcement, and is that citywide, not just for the promenade? If you recollect, I mean.
We would, it's being paid by the promenade under this structure, but we believe that a half FTE could be used throughout the city, I mean, through the other parklets and alike for this program.
And perhaps when we start to look at possibly a fee structure for the parklets throughout the city, we would be looking at funding that enforcement. So thank you for your
Mr. Mayor,
excellent recollection.
Councilman Sutton, if the fees are being generated from participants for the outdoor dining program, I don't think that it'd be appropriate that they be used throughout the city for the inspection program. So I do think it would be limited to within the promenade area
And
for those.
I'm going to jump in because respectfully, I think what we are talking about is a fee for the use of city property. So as opposed to a fee for so we were talking more about rent.
Yes.
Than a fee. And so I do believe, and I'm happy to follow up with you, Ms. Next, but I
Right.
believe that given that it's a fee for the use of our property, that's a revenue source as opposed to a fee, and that I hope that there's a differentiation there.
Okay, so when it gets to the Finance Committee, we'll explore that further. Thanks.
So then I'll clarify my comment here and make it as part of this meeting that when it does get to finance, that we explore both the FTEs necessary for enforcement or looking at whether a coordinator would be necessary, or just really exploring that in terms of meeting the need there throughout the city. Other than that, I really am gratified to hear that those 4 who are still not in compliance that are being inspected today, and be looking forward to hearing about how that was handled. And really just thank you. I think there's been a communication with the committee and more understanding about how to bring things forward on agendas and how to have communication. And I think especially with the aid of Ms. Shu, it's been communication's been much better and proactive in terms of meeting the needs. So just really looking at that enforcement citywide. Thank you.
All right, very good. Well, you've drawn some high praise from the people whom you serve on that committee, so congratulations on that. You know, I had lunch and I went with Bob Burnham and his lovely bride downtown to have lunch and walk around. And as I think about ADA handicap issues and compliances, I never think about the site issues. I always think about wheelchairs. I always think about other things. And it was real revealing to me what other challenges there are, and I hope that as we go through these things, laws compliance or no laws compliance, so we remain mindful of that for everybody in terms of what we do with transportation, in terms of what we do with audible signals, as well as other kinds of things that we do in ADA. It's not just pure code compliance that we're trying to either get to or go through. I mean, like I said, as a business person, I remember the trials and the pitfalls and a lot of court cases that went down about code compliance, almost always dealing with wheelchairs and access, which is where a lot of the law came from. But there's an entirely other sector of the community that really needs to be thought about and considered as we go through this. So I appreciate that. And with that, Mr. Jordan's light came on.
Sorry, I was slow. I looked really quick, and I remember the discussion, but I couldn't find the right minutes. I found the June meeting, but I think there was a subsequent one after that point. So I'm pretty supportive of that, too. You know, it's like we made all these steps. It's not my parents' time anymore when people were just put in a room. And then we make all these accomplishments and positive steps, but then, you know, it's just like COVID has come along too and turned people weird also. You know, whether it's brazen bicycle operators on State Street or, you know, the last 3 or 4 nights it's been just totally out of control. Motorcycle riders over on the Mesa going back and forth on Cliff Drive doing wheelies and driving at 60 miles an hour and sweeping around a car. And it's just like we can't enforce the world anymore almost. So, so it's like we have to do what we can do. And I guess what I really want to say is not to discount the historical way that we've tried to make improvements and maybe downplay today's way, which might be empowering citizens to actually use an app to take care of some of those things where we can, to really look at that and say this isn't the world we used to live in, where we can enforce and trying to improve necessarily the way we used to when my parents were alive. People are different now, they behave differently, and I think in a lot of cases we need to react and catch up. I would hate for us, just talking about that app, just in particular, I would hate for us to sit on our hands and 5 years from now, 30 or 40% of the munis in the country are using it and it's working really well, and we just sat on our hands for 5 years and watched more compliance erode, waiting for it to become more mainstream. I think sometimes there's an opportunity to get in at the start and safely, and start to be one of the change effects rather than a follower. So I just wanted to mention that. I know nothing about it, have no stock, but it was an interesting concept. Actually, Nick Kuntz talked to me I saw him at a social event, and we had a long conversation, and he brought that up, and it just sounded so simple to probably just be dangerous, right? So I hope we can look at stuff like that. That might not be the only example that's out there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Friedman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll be quick. I just want to thank the members of the AAC for all the work and hours you put in to improving our community, and it shows here that I learned a lot from this presentation about your history and what you're working on and the challenges that we as a community face in trying to improve. So I just appreciate all the work. And then Ms. Hsu, thank you for stepping in, and all the praise you got tonight. It's much deserved from the members of the AAC and others, and Ms. Clark as well for moving these forward. And I'm really pleased that we have addressed most of the parklets. I know there's on State Street, and so that there is a process to address the final non-compliance, because it's been too long, and they should all be addressed. And so I'm glad that our staff has taken that direction, and we've gained even greater compliance, and that also within the next couple of weeks we're going to be looking at those outside of State Street, because it is far beyond time that we address ADA issues with those outside of the State Street Promenade. And then that process is coming, and that staff was able to develop a new process that will be more efficient, still allow for compliance to be achieved, but in a much quicker time based on the new method that we're going to be investigating them, which gets into staff resources as well, being more efficient. So I'm thankful that staff was able to come up with that new approach and to implement it very soon. Thank you.
All right, very good. Well, this is not an action item, so thank you very much for the report and the comments. And we'll go to the council member committee assignment reports, please. That would be Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Met with the youth council staff about having the youth council be more proactive and contacting the city council about the issues that are affecting them. Met with the director of PAL about how we can work better together to serve our teen population. Attended the ribbon cutting for the first and only Latino-owned winery in the Funk Zone called Area 5.1. It was hosted by the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I was invited to speak on behalf of the city at the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation's Asian American Festival. That was just a great event. A really good turnout and a lot of great performances and speeches by people. And then I also attended the Housing Authority's self-sufficiency graduation with Eric Friedman and a few other elected representatives. And it was just a great, it's a great program that they run there, and it was a really good example for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. Going through right now. So I attended the Library Advisory Board, and they went over the budget, for the CIP proposals for next year capital improvement plan for the 24 to 28 fiscal years, and also they gave a presentation on the branding from our staff member that we have that is working on just everything from social media to communications, and it was a very impressive presentation in terms of how the library is being branded and marketed so that we can get more patrons and also just be out in the community more. And it's a very important message so that when people come into the library or experience the library, it's a unified theme, but the individual programs are able to really pop out, and a lot of thought goes into it. And the board and myself were really impressed with the presentation. And then also attended the Harbor and Seafood Festival, and I thank all of our staff on the waterfront and others who participated and made it happen, as well as our commercial fishermen and all the businesses down in the harbor. It's a great event. It really highlights one of the most important industries in Santa Barbara. We're one of the most productive ports here, and just the quality of the seafood and just the experience down there, it's great. And it was fun to have it back and enjoy live music and just amazing food fresh off the docks there. Also attended with my family the Asian American Heritage Festival, thanks to the Trust for Historic Preservation and all those who made it happen. And the favorite from my family was the K-pop dancers. So they had a lot of fun, and everybody was really clapping, and it was fun. And also the Santa Barbara UCSB breakers, so there's break dancing as well. So and among other things, and drummers, it was just a good family event, and we're glad to have that back as well. And then the Sustainability Committee attended that, and we went over an update on the contract negotiation with the Marburg for the franchise agreement, and that will be coming to council in the near future.
Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I also attended the Sustainability Committee meeting, and same update on the Marburg contract, which is going well. Thank you to our partners there. Attended a Kachuma Operations and Management Board meeting. There's so much happening. There's the end of the water year and start of the new water year, so they were doing a backwards look at the modeling over the last year, and highly accurate. And that's member agencies and the COMB staff themselves doing that, and that really helps with our allocations from the state. The lake storage at Kachuma right now is currently 60%. They're starting a sediment study that's looking at carbon, phosphorus, and also TOCs, and that really benefits our treatment plants at Cater. And then very exciting is the work that started finally on the secured pipeline. And that's underway, and it's really state-of-the-art, and a lot of really fascinating engineering happening there. And it's ahead of schedule. It'll probably be finished by December, which is very, very exciting and a long time coming.
Mr. Gutierrez, another comment?
Yeah, I don't think that anyone said this, but I just want to acknowledge that Lady Ridley Tree passed away, and she was a pretty big supporter of so many organizations in our community, and she's really going to be missed.
Very good. Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to highlight for people, I tend not to talk about matters that come before the Coastal Commission, but last week we had a commission meeting, and there were a couple of things that I think could be of particular interest. First and foremost, we heard yet another short-term rental revision. So it was a really robust conversation at the Coastal Commission, and we actually ended up sending it back because we wanted more information, more data. The jurisdiction had tried to really limit short-term rentals in the coastal zone, and there was quite the back and forth between the commission and staff. And the reason I pointed out is I know this is something that we talk about a lot here in Santa Barbara, so I wanted to highlight for anyone who might be interested in short-term rental policies to really keep up to the extent you can with Coastal Commission agenda, and I'll try to be posting it as well. But we're really at a point at the commission where we're trying to make a determination about how we are going to move forward as a body under the Coastal Act looking at short-term rentals. And I think there's a lot of folks in the city of Santa Barbara who might be interested in following that discussion. So really wanted to highlight that. And similarly, also on issues related to our sea level rise adaptation planning, which we've been spending a lot of time at the commission. There have been some long-standing disagreements on a couple of issues with sea level rise, particularly related to existing development and how we define that. It's really relevant for us here in Santa Barbara County, city of Santa Barbara as well. And that continues to come up month after month. And so it struck me this past week that these conversations have major, major, major implications for our city. And to the extent anyone is interested, please look at the agenda, reach out to me. I would be very happy to have input from all our city residents on these issues, because while we're talking statewide, the decisions we make in a jurisdiction in Northern California certainly have precedential impact here in Santa Barbara.
Mr. Freeman, do you have a last comment?
Sorry, I forgot to mention the Housing Authority Family Self-Sufficiency that Mr. Gutierrez referenced, and just wanted to say congratulations to all those who participated and made it through that program. It's always inspiring, and just another example of the partnership we have with the Housing Authority and the good work that they do in the community above and beyond just housing.
All righty, and we had the California Transportation Commission conclave. That was first time they've had it in about 3 years, and attended with Director Maurer and Ms. Bjork, and we had a band that played music that was way too loud for the age group that was there. And then we had an HLC and Planning Commission joint meeting, successfully run by Ms. Harris, that Michael Jordan and I attended. I don't know if anybody else was there, but it was spirited, to say the least. Saturday night, as Mr. Baker said, we had the Boys and Girls Club, and they raised a whole bunch of money for some really great programs that they do. And in case any of you think you've got something sticky on your seats, I had the second graders in here from Crane School yesterday, and we sat up here and took a bunch of pictures, so that was fun, and they were so much better behaved than most of the people we sit up here with. And with that, Ms. Gorman, we have an item to read.
If I may clarify, are we closing this meeting and coming back at 4:30, or?
Yes.
We should close this meeting because we have the.
Okay, we will adjourn this meeting, and then we will
Reconvene at 4:30.
reconvene at 4:30.
Correct.
Okay.
Because we've noticed that the
We have to-
closed
so we
session
have
is a
to
special
okay,
meeting, so we should
will come back
reconvene
in
it.
here to open the 4:30 meeting, is that correct?
Correct, Mr. Mayor.
We will see you in chambers at 4:30.
Very good. Thank you.